Video number 2, day 5 of quarantine. Not sure what day you're on, but that's where it is for me. Yeah, Tuesday was the last day we were opened. So, yeah. Crazy shit. Okay, so in this video I want to just briefly talk to you about clay itself and what you can and cannot do about it. These are just some really important kind of ground level things that you need to know in order for clay to be doing what you want it to do. You come in! Come in! Come in! Come in! Okay, hi! Relax. Oh. Come in! Well, do what you want to do. What do you want from me? Where was I? Clay. So here is the white clay that I'm selling. I'm also selling a red clay. So they're both stoneware. So just because they're 2 different colors, I mean they're totally different clays, but they're also the same kind of category of clays, which is called stoneware. And what that means is that they're both fired at the same temperature. They can both use the same glazes. They are different though. So the white clay is a lot smoother texture-wise. It's a lot more what we would call plastic. You can call kind of like fluid. So what that means is it's a lot softer to work with. So it's kind of nice to work with. However, when you get it very thin and also very wet, if you add too much water to it, it's going to start losing its form. So it's kind of like this wiggly, unstable thing. Whereas the red clay has what's called grog in it. So we call it grog, in German it's Schamotte. Basically that just means that there's these particles of sand inside of it. It's inside of the clay. And when you're working with it, you can actually feel them. And that's really good for adding structure. Both of these clays are suitable for working on the wheel and for hand building, however. So I wouldn't choose this clay if I was going to make a sculpture that's like this big, because it's going to lose its stability. But for small things, it's absolutely fine. Choose Peanut. If you're making something like a normal cup that's, you know, normal thickness, I would say it's fine to use either, whatever you want to use. Do keep in mind that they do change color. This is kind of gray now. It's a little creamier when it's finished, but it's quite white. And then the red looks really light when it's wet, but it's going to be quite dark. It'll be like brownish almost when it's finished. So keep that in mind when you're designing your pieces and when you're choosing the glaze colors. Definitely look at the swatches on the website. There's a few more things that you need to know. One is really important for beginners, especially because beginners are always making this mistake where they just keep adding water and water and water and so much water, and it just turns into this big mess. And also the piece starts sinking down. It starts kind of collapsing in on itself. You don't want to be using too much water. In fact, in hand building, I use sometimes never any water. You really just want to be adding it to very detailed bits here. So especially if you're taking your clay directly from the bag, it's got plenty of water in it already. So what I like to tell people is if you can smooth it without using water, do that. So when I squeeze the clay, I get some wrinkles with the clay splitting. I'm going to try and smooth it first with my finger. Just by putting some light pressure and wiping it along with my finger, I can completely smooth that out without adding water. If I've been working on the clay and it's starting to dry out, then I will just stick my finger in the water and add just a touch to it and start to work out those wrinkles. That will really help you to limit your water. And yeah, just don't use much. When you're working on the wheel, we use a lot of water. Hand building, you really don't need much. The main reason I have this water next to me is for cleaning purposes. Okay, and then the other thing about clay is that it doesn't like to be overworked. So I would not suggest using the clay as a child uses Play-Doh, right? So fine, if you're just doing this for fun and you don't want, you know, some results, fine, use it however you like. There's no problem with it. However, say you make a little bowl and then you're like, I don't like that, I'm gonna smash it and make it into, you know, a little flower shape. I don't like that, I'm gonna smash it and make it into something else. Yes, you can do that with the clay, but over time, the clay is going to start wearing down. So not only are you drying out the clay as you're working with it in your hands, which makes it less sticky, but it's also kind of forgetting its bonds, and it's just kind of being broken up into pieces. Clay has memory, so once it's settled in a position, it likes to stay in that position. I would suggest to plan out your pieces beforehand. This thing here has enough clay for 4 bowls, or 4 cups, 2, 3, maybe 4 small bowls, depending on how thick you make it. So the moral is basically just plan out your pieces before you start working on them. And then the last thing I wanted to tell you is that clay also does shrink. So from the moment that you make the piece, that's the biggest it's ever going to be, and it's just going to shrink, shrink, shrink on each step of the process. So when it dries out, it will shrink a little bit. When it's bisqued, it will shrink a little bit, and when it's final fired, it will shrink a little bit. So you can plan about 10% shrinkage in your pieces. So that means if you want your piece to be 9 centimeters wide, make it 10 centimeters wide, something like that. That's how I do it anyway. I just had another centimeter because it's usually around that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 centimeter range. So it's easy math, but do what you want to do. Yeah, that's basically it. Don't use too much water. Don't overwork your clay. Plan yourself. Plan in shrinkage as well. So have fun, guys.